Hi, Walnut. Welcome to Walnut Wants to Start a Podcast, my little tutorial on how I started Walnut Wednesday, the podcast. I've recently been getting a lot of questions from multiple people about how I use my stuff, where to even start, what camera do I use, all that sort of thing. So I thought I would just hop on and do a little tutorial about how I do things, because if you're in my walnut world, you will know I am a technophobe, meaning, actually, I don't know the meaning of technophobe, but basically my meaning of a technophobe is that I am not very clever with technology. It overwhelms me. I find it hard. So I need the easiest, breeziest, most sprickliest way to do stuff. So if you're new here, my name is Lara, but you can call me Lads, and I am the creator and host of Walnut Wednesday, the podcast. Walnut Wednesday started as a podcast, and now it's grown into more of a movement, but the podcast is where it all began. So this is where I'm going to share it with you. For the first part, I want to share a little bit about the backstory, how it came about, and then I want to get into the technicals. If you have any questions, please feel free to leave a comment and I will come back to them. And I think I will do a little Q&A session after this as well. So I hope you enjoy this, but let's keep this conversation going. And if you have any further questions, let's work on them together. So first of all, I wanted to share how Walnut Wednesday actually came about. We have to backtrack a little while for the era of my peanut era, Laz, where total people pleaser mode. I spent my life feeling like a doormat a lot of the time, and always always in a state of burnout. And I always felt like a bit of a headless chicken running around after everyone else, filling up my plate with everyone else, and especially filling my plate with people who took up more of my time and didn't give me as much time back. Like my give and receive was sort of out of kilter, and I was also putting a lot of energy into places where I potentially could have focused on more sunshine and rainbow friends and more people who actually gave me stuff, rather than being an endless water fountain of giving, if that makes sense. So really, really high into people pleasing. And I say this with a full disclaimer as well, Walnut, that I didn't have a bad life. I've had a really, really good and privileged and happy life. A lot of these feelings are all just how I felt on the inside, and to do with my worthiness and how I thought and valued myself. So my walnut journey has actually been a journey of the self and finding my self-love and finding the way to actually liking myself. So when I refer to my peanut era, it is an era of deep self-loathing. I didn't appreciate myself. I didn't even like myself. I want to say that I woke up one day, but it wasn't really one day. I recognized that I actually hated myself. I didn't like who I was. I was embarrassed all the time. I would try and be like the peacock life of the party and embarrass myself for at my own expense, and for the happiness of others, to try and make people laugh and to try and make people have a good time. It's so weird looking back on it now, right? So in peanut era, I was just farting around like normal, and I came across a podcast, and I'd never listened to a podcast before, but basically because I had gone to a crystal fair with my mum and bought a crystal that was a crystal water bottle that had the crystal fluorite, which was for abundance. And I was like, "Ooh, abundance, what a cool word. I've never listened to a podcast before. Why don't I just search on Spotify abundance and see what comes up?" So I had a little browse through, and I found the beautiful, amazing, my friend Viola Hugg's podcast, The Abundant Babes, which has been discontinued, but it's still like alive in the world. And I binged that back to back because I had a drive. I had a 1 hour each way drive, and her episodes were about 40 minutes long, so it was perfect timing. And I just binged my way through those podcasts. And being named Abundant Babes, I'm sure you can imagine all the stuff that kind of came through. And that was sort of in parallel with like doing my Reiki training and stuff. I'd always been sort of interested in self-development, but this kind of introduced me into the world of mentorship and coaching and crossing it with woo-woo crazy crystal lady stuff, which I've always been into, right? So that's the little backstory, is how I kind of like did that. And from then I basically just dove headfirst into a bunch of personal development, and I haven't really ever jumped back out. I love knowing myself. I love not learning more about myself and all that kind of stuff. So that is where the peanut era kind of took a little bit of a turn, and I started digging really deep, and it sucked a lot of the time because I had to look at myself. And why would you want to look at yourself when you don't bloody like what you see? So I put the work in, I put the work in a lot of my podcasts is examples of this. But basically, I ended up somehow, Viola wrote a book and did all this stuff. I ended up like winning a mastermind call because I purchased her book. And in the mastermind call, I was like, what the heck is a mastermind call? And basically it's a bunch of people doing hot seat coaching with the mentor. And from then I was like, oh my gosh, this is a whole other world. What the heck? I ended up signing up for a program called Soulful Business Academy. I was just a little old travel agent at the time, didn't have a business, didn't feel soulful, and academy wise, I mean, I was just farting around the place doing things for everybody else but myself. So I don't even know. I don't know. I still to this day don't know, but I signed up. I did a payment plan. I was embarrassed. I didn't tell anyone. It was so much money for me, air quotes, at the time. And so I did this business course, and out of that, I remember at the back end, I just had this little feeling, and yeah, like I said, I don't even really listen to the one podcast, right? Abundant Babes. I'd never really listened to other podcasts, or I didn't really know that world, and podcasts weren't really that like up and trending back then to my knowledge either. So it was all quite new, and I remember thinking like, I think I'm going to start a podcast. And I just had the thought and it floated away and it did the things. I was like, oh my God, imagine if I started a podcast. And I ended up sitting outside at my parents' place one day, and they have a walnut tree. So there was a big basket of walnuts like drying. And I thought, I just got this like sacral nudge to take a photo with a walnut in front of my face. And to this day, that is the Walnut Wednesday iconic photo, which is just a selfie off my phone. And I remember posting in this business group. I was like, I don't know what this is. I don't know what this photo is. I don't know what is going to come of it, but this is something. And so again, I left it at that. I left it as like a little breadcrumb to just plonk it, just to give it an essence, right? To give it a life and let it be out in the universe and do its thing. And so then Geordie, my partner, and I, we were off for the Trans-Siberian Railway, one of our like absolute trips of a lifetime. And Walnut Wednesday actually started as I just kind of noticed as homework for this course, I was kind of sharing a lot of like vulnerable stuff. And I noticed from the comments that a lot of people feel the same way I did about things like, feeling like you don't want to be too much and you don't want to stand out, but you want to still fit in and all that kind of thing. And I kind of deep dove into topics like that, just of how things are hard. And in the comments, I kind of had a lot of people resonating with what I had to say. And it made me realize, oh my gosh, there's a lot of people that feel the same way I do. Why don't we talk about this? And I remember being on my trip, and I started just, it was a Wednesday, and I started just sharing vulnerable stuff and made it Walnut Wednesday, like to share things that made me nervous. I remember I was in Russia, and I literally just had like the most upset stomach from like being on the plane and stuff. Not upset. I was very, that's an overshare we don't need to get into, but let's just say I was very bloated. And I remember sharing that. I was very uncomfortable all the time and things like that, which was just an Instagram story and a Facebook post on my personal page, just Walnut Wednesday. Here's a vulnerable share every single week. And then that nudge came. It was like, oh, it's a podcast. It's a podcast where every Wednesday I share something brave. I share something vulnerable, because it is very brave and courageous to share these things out into the world. You go through all the shame and all the weird things that we have as a society, where it's not cool to like say how you actually feel, and we have to code everything to whatever. So that's how it started. That is my background story. I hope you enjoyed that story time. And from then, I'm going to section this up into a couple parts. So this is kind of like the history, and then what I did, and then we'll get into the technicals and so on. So after I decided, okay, this is the podcast, where do I even begin? What does one do when they don't know where to begin? The YouTube. I YouTubed, and I think I would have written, I think this is what I wrote, easy ways to start a podcast, because I'm a technophobe. It needed to be easy and simple, because I already like had my plate so bloody full up my own like butthole that I didn't even know if I had time to fit any of this bloody stuff in. And yeah, I just needed it to be simple. I find all the other stuff hard. And when people talk about like RSS feeds and all that stuff, it just goes over my head. So again, Walnut preface, I am no techno guru. I am very easy breezy busy bee. So I pick the simple things. There probably is a much easier way or a more strategic, planned out way to do this, but this is my way. So for your information, take or leave as you please. So I YouTubed that, and I came across Anchor FM, and I'm gonna in the next part do a little like screeny share and things like that for you. But Anchor is basically a site that allows you to, it's basically a third party that does all the hard stuff for you, and then sends your podcast to Spotify, Apple, and like I think 5 other places, including those 2, which to me was enough, right? I just needed it to go to places I listen to it, like the iTunes and the Spotify. So what I did was signed up on an Anchor account, just literally on my phone. And I initially started doing episodes, just sat in my car before work, because apparently I saw on the YouTube somewhere that in the car is the best acoustics. And I sat like this with my phone and recorded episodes, all from the Anchor app on my phone. On Anchor, I will show you shortly how that you can create an intro and an outro, but basically through the app, just from phone, is literally press the record button and upload, and you can add in little sounds, or the intros and outros, as you please, and pop a little blurb, and Bob's your uncle. So sounds all really hard, but that is all I did. That's it. Anchor, downloaded Anchor, set up a profile, recorded my voice, the end. So the first thing that you want to do when you get Anchor is obviously create the intro. And my intro is still the same from that very first day, and practiced. I think I did a couple recordings and none of them were good enough. So I was like, this is just going to be it. And the rest is history. Now I do a little bit more, which I will get into on part 2 of how I actually do stuff and what camera I use and microphone and things. But that's how the first good bunch of episodes went down, was just me and my phone sitting in the car. And that's why I got this old thing, a pop filter, because I think it was actually Geordie who was like, you need a pop filter, because when I said the P's and any pop sounds, it kind of like picked up. So that's when I ended up getting this pop filter when I started using a microphone. But in the early stages, just the phone mic. That's, if you go back and listen to the first episode, it was all just held in my hand, me talking into my phone. You can now buy like portable microphones that you can plug into your cell phone, and like, I don't know if you've seen on like various social medias, people who hold like little microphones, and they are really cute and amazing for if you want to just start podcasting on the go and want a more crisper sound. But for me, it did the trick, right? So I'm going to leave that at part 1, which is how it kind of started, and basically how, I mean, you might already have a very similar experience to me where you're like, I'm going to start a podcast. And it can be as easy as that. So if you want to have a look, open up Anchor. And if you want a little bit more of like a screen grabby, then head to the next session of this. This is Walnut Wants to Start a Podcast, part 1. And I'm going to jump on and talk to you in part 2 now.